myself again.
Good evening and welcome to NUFC Matters with me, Steve Wraith and Holly Blades. It's Monday night. Good evening, Holly.
Evening, how are you doing?
I'm good. I haven't got man flu after you're sneezing and sneezing on your way to Old Trafford and back. You've recovered as well. You haven't got COVID, which is good news. But yeah, good to see you again. And obviously talk about Newcastle United over the last 7 days, and plenty of comments coming in, over 100 people already watching. So I'm sure it will be an interesting show. But let's get your take on the game first, Holly. What did you make of the Man United game?
First half, I was really surprised. I think we played a lot better than I could have ever imagined. And then you were starting to get that confidence, thinking, could we get something out of this game, which was beyond kind of your wildest dreams going into it, because you saw their lineup and you just thought, wow, you thought, it's going to be an easy 4-0 or whatever. We drew for like majority of the first half, and you thought the point was well deserved. And then unfortunately we conceded one going into half time, which we knew would dent the team's confidence. They came into the second half and then went on to concede another 3. Do I think it was a fair result? No, I don't think 4-1 was a fair reflection. Maybe 3-1, at most 2-1. But 4-1 was quite harsh on Newcastle. I think Freddie Woodman was certainly at fault for the first 2 goals. If those 2 goals hadn't have went in, then we may have went on to get something from that game. Who knows? But that certainly didn't help the morale of the team whatsoever. But Man U, fair play to them. They had brilliant players on the pitch and they performed, immaculately on the day. So they did deserve the win. Disappointing. You are now worrying going into that Leeds game on Friday, because you're thinking this is a must win now. We need points on the board.
Who impressed you at the weekend then?
Almiron was my man of the match by far. So impressed with him. I think he's had a hard start to the season. The system that we've been playing hasn't been suiting him very well. He struggled to fit in that kind of team, but he just really came out of his shell against Manchester United, and he definitely performed to the best of his ability. He was going in for every ball, making great runs, and constantly, every time you seen him on the ball, he wasn't doing anything wrong. He was just putting in 100% effort, and it was great to see that. I think Mankio was also good in the defence. I think he definitely deserves to stay in that starting lineup from now on. But those 2 were the main players that stood out for me. And St. Maximin as well. I know he had a mixed review. Some people were saying that they felt like he was being very selfish in that game and he could have made better decisions when it comes to passing the ball, etc. And I do agree with that to a certain extent. But again, I think he did stand out because he was putting off the Man United defence.
Woodman came in for a bit of stick as well, didn't he? I mean, horrific spill really after a wicked deflection for Ronaldo's first goal back in the Premier League. The second goal, his legs were as wide as the Tyne Bridge and essentially, basically just made it easy for Ronaldo. And, the man that they've greeted like a god at Old Trafford managed to bag a brace. But I think Woodman, I don't know, a bit like a vampire. He's afraid of crosses, isn't he?
Yeah, he is. I think it's certainly something that he needs to work on. I think there's a few things within this game that he needs to work on. I think he panics a lot. And, when it comes to doing things like that, he's caught the ball and you think, as a Premier League goalkeeper, that should be job done. But then he spilled the ball and you just think, my God, if that had been Dubravka or Darlow, it probably wouldn't have happened. And then again, for the second goal, I think he was at fault for that too. So for me, he was probably the worst player on the pitch for Newcastle. I think it was great that he came out on Twitter and owned up, said, I do have to take responsibility for the mistakes I made. It wasn't good enough. And then hopefully he comes into the game on Friday and he corrects those mistakes and he has a great game. But for me, I think he was very, very nervy, and I think the confidence just wasn't there with Woodman.
Yeah, I think there's just a tad bit of nervousness on his behalf. There's clearly not any confidence in him at the moment. That kind of stuff has to be worked on. I think it's a bit harsh to say he's not a Premier League class keeper. He's coming to the side at a hard time. It's just difficult. It's a difficult time at the moment, and I think that the fact that we have another injury now to Wilson, and one which now looks as if it's going to be extended through to next month, is the more concerning thing. And if we cast our minds back a couple of shows, Holly, when we had been on our adventures to the pre-season friendlies, and remember listening to one, I think it was after Rotherham, Steve Bruce conference, where he more or less was asked by our very own Liam Kennedy whether a striker was a possibility coming in through the door. And he said, no, we're all right for strikers. It's quite clear we're not.
No, not at all. But that's what we've said all along. I think everyone on the show is in agreement that when we get an injury to Wilson, it's a nightmare because we have a massive goal drought. There's no one else that can put the ball in the back of the net that you can rely on. 5 or 6 strikers, he said. I mean, we've got Dwight Gale. That's about it, really. Joe Linton, of course, he's the one that usually starts, but he's not an out-and-out striker. And Dwight Gale just isn't up to that standard that we'd want him to be up to, unfortunately. So now that Wilson's going to be out the side for the next few games, you just massively worry and thinking who is going to step up and take that responsibility of scoring goals. And I can't see where the goals are going to come from. And of course, when we're in the predicament we are now, 19th in the league, it's just another worry. And you're thinking, this relegation fight's just going to get harder. And yes, it is only a few games into the season, but we're already starting to worry.
Big shout out to the Gallagher End Pigeon who was in the chat tonight, telling us to smash the like button, subscribe, and show your support. Thank you very much, Gallagher End Pigeon. Good to have your wing on the button tonight. Thank you very much. This whole season, we knew, I think, from the start was going to be a hard one, but it's panning out even worse than I expected, and we're only a few games in. Leeds United, as you've already mentioned, could be an absolute disaster, not just on the pitch but off it, because we're only at Monday now. The Leeds message boards and Facebook pages are already full of people asking the question, who's got tickets for the home end? And because the club have put the tickets on general sale, we have this rather unnerving feeling going to this game that we're going to be surrounded by Leeds United fans in our own stadium.
Yeah, again, horrendous kind of organisation from the club. We've seen it happen before. A few years ago, if you cast your mind back to Rafa's last game at home, and when we played Liverpool, there was hell on then. So many Liverpool fans in the home end. It was a massive safety issue, and I'm sure the police won't be happy whatsoever. So it is going to be a nightmare. And you've got to remember now we've got this situation with Bruce where a lot of fans are unhappy, and it does have the potential to get quite toxic, especially if we get beat. So if you've got angry Newcastle fans at Steve Bruce and Leeds fans in the home end who are obviously going to be feeling very kind of cocky that they've probably beat us, then it's just going to be a recipe for disaster, to be honest. And I think the club need to seriously start prioritising the fans' safety above making profit.
Yeah, Friday night, people will be taking half days. The town is going to be absolutely bouncing pre-match, and I think it could be bouncing after the match. And of course, talk of protests as well, Holly. We've seen it. We went along to the very first meeting. The suggestion is that people bring in whistles and paper aeroplanes. I've seen suggested. Again, it's the kind of thing that splits opinion. Protests. I guess their idea behind the paper planes and the whistles is that they're going to disrupt the game and do it legally. What's your thoughts on that?
For me, I think hats off to anybody that's trying to do something. Personally, is paper planes and whistles the way to go? I don't think so, in my opinion. If it does work, then fair enough. And, I'll hold my hands up and say, well, we got what we wanted. But I just don't think it's going to have the desired effect. I mean, yes, it might get the game called off, but I don't know. It's a funny one because obviously we're protesting now kind of against the whole situation with Steve Bruce, the way the club's being run by Ashley, the lack of investment, the list goes on. But Steve Bruce, I think what matters the most is what he's doing on the pitch. And at the moment, he's not stepping up to the mark. So he's going to cause himself his own problems without us having to do it for him, in my opinion. And then Mike Ashley, get the game called off. I really don't think that he wants to be here. If he does, then it's just a funny one because you think what is for the best, and I really don't know. I can't answer that question. But I think, yes, we do need to do something, but getting the game called off, especially on Friday, I just don't think it's going to help us because we've got so many issues. The morale in the team is so low. We're desperate for these points. It's a big game. And yes, we probably won't get them. But if we get the game called off, we've got no chance whatsoever. And then you worry, is the Premier League going to put consequences in place? Will they deduct points, etc.? Because that would just turn what's already a nightmare into an even bigger one. Yeah,
plenty of food for thought, and we'll come to the chat over the next 10 minutes or so. But I did want to have a legend on this show today, and it's a word which gets bandied around quite a bit. But this guy really has stepped up to the plate after being given the most horrendous news in 2019. He was given 12 months to live. And yesterday, of course, we saw that wonderful sight of the Great North Run. Now, this man completed it. Who is this man, you might say? Well, it is Anth Loma, former Newcastle United player. How are you, Anth?
I'm all right. I'm a little bit stiff this morning.
I bet you are, mate. My God. I mean, I've followed the progress. I've given you a bit of support on Twitter and social media. And I think just to go from stem cell transplant to half marathon in something like 20 months, when you were actually, as I mentioned just at the top of the item there, 12 months to live you were given in December 2019. Listen, I think the fact that you wanted to show that having cancer isn't a death sentence, I think you've proved it, brother. Well done, mate.
Thank you very much. It was. It's weird. I'll go back to when I left hospital and after me transplant, and my car was parked at the top of a hill, about 400 meters away, and it took me half an hour to get up. I had to stop. I couldn't even get to the top of the street. So just to come to where I was, I mean, I actually signed up for the Great North Run 18 months ago, and it was just a mad thing. I thought, right, I've got to do something. I've got to prove something to myself. And what's always worked for myself over the last few years is to give myself something to look forward to and challenge myself. And I always try and do something quite big every 2 years. So it's something growing up with it. Obviously, I was 10-year-old when it first started, so I was too young to do it. And then when I got to my teenage years, obviously I was involved with Newcastle, so nipping off to do the Great North Run was something I could never do. So it's something that's been really good that I've been able to come back and do it. So another tick off the bucket list.
Yeah, I tell you what really stood out yesterday, just watching it on the TV, was the obviously the fact we weren't going to South Shields, but I just loved the fact it had that London Marathon feel where they were going round, the sites of Newcastle and up Warwick Street and going round Gray's Monument. What was the support like going through Newcastle City Centre?
It was brilliant, to be honest. I mean, the support all day was fantastic. I ran it with a lady who's helped me and trained me through the last few weeks, and she's not from Newcastle, although she was in university, obviously a good few years ago. And we were just saying, the people that came out who had probably no family or friends, just stood by the roadside for hours on end, clapping and cheering people, just kept us all going. And when we actually got back, I mean, I got to 10.5 miles, and literally my legs gave up on me. And I have to be honest, in the last couple of miles, I sort of walked. But I walked through the town from the Tyne Bridge, and the support was amazing, And I think if I had the energy in it, it would have been nice to have obviously put a little jog in. And to be honest, and the other thing was, I got quite emotional. So when I came through off the Tyne Bridge and I turned and obviously seen the monument, it put a lump in my throat, and the people on the streets, it just helped you through. And even though, like you say, I walked the last little bit, even all the way through past the Haymarket and through the town, it was fantastic, and see everybody come out, and you can see how lockdown is brought so many people back together, to be out in the streets and enjoying yourselves, and the pubs were full, and it was just a fantastic day. It's something that I'll remember for the rest of my life. Hopefully it's longer than 12 months.
Have you got a taste for it? Do you think you would put yourself forward to do it again next year?
Well, it was really funny because yesterday night when I finished, I couldn't bend my leg. My knee was that sore, and I was like, I'm never, ever doing this again. And then I woke up this morning and I was like, everyone who you spoke to talked about the difference, like the South Shields finish in running along obviously the coast and that. And I sort of thought, do you know what it is? I quite fancy finding out what that bit's like. And other things I've seen today where like the elite runners have talked about how difficult the course was yesterday, how undulating it was. So I'll think, well, if I go to South Shields, this must be dead easy. So I'll be all right. I'll crack it and run all 13.1 miles. So yeah, I think I've been bitten by the bug a little bit. I've enjoyed the training. I've enjoyed the process. I think I'd like to do the South Shields thing. I've got my missus. She downloaded Couch to 5K this morning. So what was it? So yeah, hopefully yeah, I can get on and do it again.
Who were you raising money for yesterday, Anth?
So initially, I got the place through the lymphoma charity, which is based in Aylesbury. So I raised money for them. So obviously I got my place into the run, and then yes, so over the weekend I was raising money for my support group. So I've set up an online support group for cancer patients. I just felt I felt I'd been given an opportunity to help people. So I set up a support group, and then over the weekend I sort of put a link onto my GoFundMe page. So anybody that wanted to and could donate did so over the weekend. So yeah. So I just think it was just important, I just from my point of view, I want to try and grow the support group. I'm working with the PFA. Hopefully we can turn that into a charity as well. And then just try and help as many people as we can,
Fantastic. I've stuck the link for brightsidecic.org in the chat. I've pinned it to the top, and there is a link. If you scroll down on the home page, if you scroll right down, you will see visit my GoFundMe page. So anybody wants to make a small donation tonight, or a big donation, whatever you can, please do, because it's a great cause. Anth has done it now. We've got the picture there with his medal, just as a reminder. But please give him some support. He's an ex-Newcastle player. And just before we finish, Anth, just briefly talk about the time. I guess at Wallsend Boys Club, first of all, it's a question I don't have the answer to. I mean, were you involved at any time with some of the names that we know from there, the likes of Alan Shearer and I guess Steve Bruce?
Well, obviously, Steve Bruce is a lot older than me. What was it? So at the time I went going through Wallsend, I'm trying to think. So like Peter Beardsley I was a schoolboy when Peter was about. When I joined, I mean, my era at the boys' club was Davy Roach, Davy Robinson, a lot of the young lads that came through as apprentices. When I played my first year, obviously Paul was there, Paul Gascoigne. Then you had like Michael and Neil, Darren Jackson, Glenn Roder, Dave McCreary. So we had a good blend of experienced players in youth. But I mean, I was probably involved with Newcastle from being about 12-year-old. And that's when I started doing quite well with Wallsend and had a few trials. And then I joined Newcastle at 12, and they stuck me. I mean, I was quite tall, so they stuck me in with the under-14s quite quickly. Me and Alan Shearer are a school year apart, although we're only about 3 months apart in like dates of birth. So Alan used to play from time to time for Wallsend, but there was a couple of competitions where we sort of mixed age groups and stuff like that. And obviously Wallsend still have a dinner, and we all sit around that and share stories, and we all become one, so. Although I haven't been back for a few years, if we're all there, Alan will come across, or Peter will come across, and we're just normal people all sat around the table, talking about the good old days.
Yes, and that's tending how we get through football nowadays. I mean, you had the honour, I guess, of pulling on the black and white shirt, which is fantastic. But you also had the honour of scoring for Newcastle, and just tell us what that was like for you, being a local lad.
Well, as you know, growing up in Newcastle, there's not, apart from having a beer and a good night out, it's all football related, So growing up as a young lad, that's all I ever wanted to do was play for Newcastle. To get my debut, I think first of all, I think I played for the first team when I was around about 16-year-old. Made my debut at 17, to score after 4 minutes in front of the Gallagher end. It's just a dream come true, I mean, you give any young lad that prospect of this is what will happen to you, you'd snap their hands off, So the first year was there, I got a couple of goals. The second year wasn't so great, and we had the problems obviously with relegation, and obviously the problems with the board and stuff like that. And so obviously some things never change. And then what was it? But yeah, I mean, it was a fantastic time. You know what I mean? It was and you just saw, I mean, to have a year playing with Paul Gascoigne before he signed for Spurs, and then obviously he went on to the World Cup, was just, people talk about it today, ask you questions about it today, and it was just immense to work with somebody like that. And then you had like the hardened professionals who just grilled like being a good pro every day. Your Glenn Roders and your Dave McCreery's. It was just a fantastic atmosphere. It was brilliant.
Yeah, lots of positivity coming in the chat. Lots of people saying congratulations and well done. And all of those people who are saying that, please visit the website. It is at the top of the chat. Drop some donations in. Let's get a few more quid in for Anth. Anth, absolute pleasure to have you on, mate. I'll let you get back to your bath and whatever else you're doing to try and pull yourself round, mate. And people saying I should do it next year. Look, 100%. I've wanted to do it for a long time. I turn 50 next year. I think it's a good time to do it as well for me next year. So good stuff. Well, keep in touch, Anth, and anything you need from me to promote your charity, give us a shout, pal.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Take care, mate.
Guys. Ta-da now.
Bye-bye. Bye. Great to have Anth on, Holly, and what an achievement to be diagnosed with such a horrific disease, only to decide that you're going to battle it, fight it, and crack on, and then a couple of years later, all the way through COVID, manages to get around and do the Great North Run.
Yeah, it's a fantastic achievement, and I think it takes a very strong and a very brave person to do something like that, because the Great North Run for the average person is, something that's really difficult. It takes a lot of training and a lot of time and effort, and then to have like an illness as severe as, what he had, and then to come and do it anyway it's brilliant. And I think that's great, the charity that he's chosen to do it for and everything. So just well done to him.
Yeah, it'll be the Great North Walk that I'll be doing, i.e. I'll be walking around the Great North Run. I'm not a runner, but I will. I promised that I would do it at some point. Well, I think next year is a good year to do it. Okay, I make no apologies for having Anth on tonight and taking up a little bit of our time. Check out his link. Please make a donation to his charity tonight. Lee Taylor, good evening. He says, I've heard two different stories over the last few days. One that Steve Bruce has 3 games remaining, starting with the Man United match. And now Luke Edwards has popped up with his story, which of course is that Bruce is like the Teflon Don. He is going nowhere. Which one do you believe, Holly, and which one would you like to believe?
I would like to believe that he's got the 3 games left, and I think that's the one that I do believe, because I think for a long time it felt like regardless of how badly we played or how bad the results were, he'd be still stuck here. That's how it did feel for a long time. But I think Ashley, he's not, well, he is silly. I mean, I'm not even going to say that, to be honest. But you'd like to think that he has even an ounce of intelligence to the point where he'd realise that we can't get relegated, because it would be an absolute travesty if we did get relegated, and there's no way we'd come back up like we have done the past 2 times in the current climate. So you'd like to think that he's thinking now, it's not working out, I need to make a change to keep us in the Premier League, and that's what we all want. So yeah, I think he probably, the clock is ticking, his time is probably running out, and that's probably for the best. It is a worry when you think we're going to get rid of the manager. There'll be a bit of kind of unsettlement within the team. Some people will be happy, some people will be unhappy. Then who are we going to bring in? That is, of course, the big worry. But at the end of the day, we can't stay stuck with Steve Bruce here, because while he's here, nothing's going to improve.
Yeah, I would agree. Carl says, away from all the doom and gloom at Newcastle at the moment, I see Demba Ba's officially retired. What's your favourite moment? Got to be his hat-trick against Stoke and strawberry syrup. Demba Ba, it's a player which you can remember, Holly. He was a good player at Newcastle, came in alongside Cisse as well. Sad to see him retire, I guess, but it happens to them all.
Yeah, it is sad to see him retire, but I think, he's had a decent career. Of course, the season that he had with us in the Europa League was something that I think most Newcastle fans that were supporting us around that time will remember kind of forever. And of course, the strawberry syrup interview, I think people will remember that as well. Probably the most bizarre thing we've ever heard in an interview, but there you go, each to their own, I guess. But yeah, Demba Ba, I think he'll have a good career to look back on, and best of luck to him in his retirement. And I'd love to see him, kind of come back to Newcastle at some point and be in the stands maybe as a fan or whatever, and just to show that he still has those memories. Yeah,
me too. Darren says, question for Holly, are you involved in this protest group? And if yes, what are the plans for the Leeds game?
No, I'm not involved, Darren, not this time. If you want to find out, obviously, more information from them, I'd say just go on their Twitter page, which is @ProtestNUFC, and they'll be able to answer any questions.
Gallagher and Pigeon says, hi, everyone. Hi, Gallagher and Pigeon, whoever you are. Tom Dixon says, since Steve Bruce was appointed Newcastle manager, he has had 80 Premier League games. He's won 23. That is a win percentage of 28.75%. Cheers, Tom, for that. Roger Cook says, evening crew, shock, over. 4-1, a goal better than I thought. Confident of getting one on Friday. Leeds United coming into town on Friday. I watched the highlights against Liverpool. Difficult really to judge them on that particular game because of the sending off, which I thought was a tad unfair when I watched the challenge from different angles. I guess because the young lads have suffered a horrendous injury. Maybe the referee felt he didn't have any other decision to make, but the guy clearly got the ball. Wasn't an intentional foul. It was a harsh one, but hard to judge Leeds against Liverpool. It's a big game for both teams. I think Newcastle are on a crest of a slump, and it really, really, really depends on, what kind of formation he goes for. I guess if he goes all out attack like he tried to do in fits and starts against Man United, we might get something out of the game, but I'm not confident really at all. Holly?
I've predicted a 3-2 defeat. I can't see us getting a couple of goals. To be honest with you, I think it'll be a situation similar to Southampton. I think we'll probably be 2-2, and then later on in the game they'll get their third and just kind of put us back in our box, and then again we'll start panicking about Watford. That's how I think it'll go. Yeah,
good to see Rachel back in the chat. You're glad to hear Almiron had a good match. Let's hope it's a turning point for him. Rachel. Almiron was Holly's man of the match, and he was my man of the match. I think he ran himself into the ground. He was at the heart of everything positive, and I thought he played really well. And I mean, Holly, you said that at the top of the show.
Yeah, I did. I thought he was really, really good. And certainly a different player to what he was a few weeks ago. So hopefully whatever was missing's just clicked with him now, and he can manage to find his way back into the team. Because on his day, I do think he's by far one of our best players, and he's certainly someone that's got a lot of pace, and that's something that's massively important, because there's many times where you see St. Maximin running into the box and all the other players are half a mile behind him. They just can't keep up. So players like Mickey are important to keep up with that pace.
Yeah, I would agree. Dave Harrison asks, thoughts on the Steve Bruce Oppressor train crash, in my opinion, he says. We watched this on the way back from the match. And to be honest, we really could not believe what we were hearing. That it was all the Evening Chronicle's fault, Holly.
I know. It was one of those moments where you think, am I hearing this right? And, I've watched it a couple of times since then as well, but every time it gets worse, to be honest. You just kind of cringe as a Newcastle fan that this is the guy representing our club to the media. It's so embarrassing. I mean, attacking a local newspaper and local journalists in the way that he does is just, it's absolutely, astounding how he gets away with it. I think any other manager would have been informed by whoever at the club that's kind of in charge of those sort of things. Listen, you can't be going on like this. It reflects badly on the club, but yet he gets away with it. He certainly can't accept blame. He doesn't like criticism whatsoever, and he'll deflect it onto whoever he feels fit to take the blame. I don't know how the likes of Lee Ryder and Craig Hope have any kind of say on who's in the team or how the results go or the formation or whatever. That's his job, which he isn't doing correctly, and we got beat. And just say, listen, I'm not good enough, I'm struggling, and own up to it, but he can't do that, and he puts the blame on anyone that can take it.
Yeah, he does. And to be honest, it was a car crash, Dave. It was awful to watch. The succession of questions he was asked, of course, were questions, I guess, which would antagonise anybody after a defeat. But to ask him about, fans singing songs against him, I guess that answer was the kind of answer I probably would have given in a lot of ways. Well, what do you want us to say? I'm delighted. Of course, I'm not delighted. I didn't disagree with that, but I think the fact that he decided to have a pop at the media, you're only going to end up reaping what you sow after that. And the Chronicle, have done all that. I watched categorically each individual journalist who works for the Chronicle having a dig at Steve Bruce, saying it's not the Chronicle's fault, it's not the Chronicle's fault. The back page on the Chronicle today was all about that, and essentially saying that Steve Bruce blames the Chronicle. They're having a field day. It's good for sales, good for paper, good for links, good for clicks, whatever you want to call it. And it's sad. It's a sad state of affairs. I mean, what's next? Are they going to get banned Maybe there'll be a place back in the ground for Gibbo and Supermac, who knows? But we will wait and see. Big shout out to the sponsor, Spider VPN. Google Spider VPN, and they come up at the top of your search list for all your internet security. They are the boys to trust. Thank you for your ongoing support. Big shout out as well to skipsandbins.com. Telephone 0800 25 45 25 3. Email inquiries at skipsandbins.com. Website www.skipsandbins.com. Easy, contract free, and pay as you go waste collection. Thanks again to Scott and the lads for their support. L&G Family Funeral Directors, again with us another month. 0191 389 7245. And qtechshop.co.uk, the makers of pool tables and snooker tables in Wallsend in Newcastle. And a big thank you to John at Jab Signature for producing all of our flyers. First time visitor to the channel, click onto the Newcastle Legends logo in the bottom right hand corner and you can subscribe to the channel for free. Hit the like button, which is the little thumb. Click share to your social media. Drop into the comments to talk to like-minded Newcastle fans or to put a question for us to discuss. If you like listening to podcasts and you're out and about, go to the gym or whatever, we are on iTunes, Spotify, Podbean and the rest. All the shows usually added within 24 hours of the show ending. Don't forget as well, we do support the food bank. NUFC fans, foodbank.co.uk. The bucket is still there, and if you want to make a donation to the food bank at any time, you can do so digitally. You've still got an opportunity in this case to enter into that raffle to win that watch, which will be drawn at the pool night once John from QTech is back on his feet from COVID. He's also set the website up, nufcmatters.com. T-shirts, shirts, football shirts, you name it, cups, saucers, towels, bags, everything on there that John has dreamt up whilst he's been in his sick bed with COVID. London Calling t-shirts, some of my particular favourites, and of course the Ryan Taylor Over the Wall t-shirt, £15, all of that from nufcmatters.com. And we've also got a couple of events coming up which we will be at. All of these are on sale at the website newcastlelegends.com. An evening with Gavin Peacock, 29th of October. Gavin is also promoting his book and be bringing copies of his book to sell that night, as well as doing a Q&A with me. Also got the Christmas night, which has now done over 120 tickets. Fantastic that, in aid of the food bank. So you can get your tickets again from newcastlelegends.com on there. Supermac is doing a Q&A on that night, and we've just announced on Friday an evening with Peter Beardsley, Friday, November the 26th at the Irish Centre as well. All three events at the Irish Centre with Malcolm MacDonald and with Gavin Peacock. And again, tickets from newcastlelegends.com, an evening with Peter Beardsley. So get yourself onto the website, click shop, and it takes you on a scroll down list and you will see all the events listed on there. And if you missed the talk, the chat that I did with Mick Lowes, that's online still now. Well worth listening to what Mick had to say about the game at Old Trafford. Well worth popping on. I did see this on Twitter, Holly, which again, the whole Rafa Bruce thing never gets forgotten, does it really? And Bruce really turning around in a press statement and saying, if you're a club like ours that expects to be in the bottom half of the Premier League, it's always tough. That was Steve Bruce. Rafa, when he was here, we're not a stepping stone, we are Newcastle United. Every player should be honoured to wear the shirt of this club. They should feel the same passion that the fans feel. If there's ever two quotes, Holly, that really sum up both of the managers that we've had over the last 2 years, it's those two quotes, isn't it?
It is. And you know what, Steve, for everyone that ever says, Rafa and Bruce have done a similar job, why do Newcastle fans love Rafa so much and then they hate Steve Bruce? That answers your question, just those two quotes right there. It just totally sums up the mindset that one manager had compared to another manager. And Rafa matched the ambitions of the fans. He saw Newcastle as a massive club, a club that should be doing better, should be pushing on, should be climbing the league and should be challenging for things. Whereas Steve Bruce clearly has the same mindset as Mike Ashley and whoever's running the club, that 17th's the ambition, and if we get that then we should be happy, which is just a joke, and it's certainly not something that I would ever go along with or ever be satisfied and happy with. I think Steve Bruce constantly has a habit of undermining the club in kind of press statements and in press conferences. And this is something we spoke about on Saturday. He constantly bigs up the opposition and belittles Newcastle, which is the one thing you don't want to see from your manager, whereas Rafa had the opposite approach. And I've seen some of his comments he's made, whilst being Everton manager. And again, it just shows the professionalism from the man. And whereas Steve Bruce, he really doesn't have an ounce of professionalism, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I would agree. And it's always going to be the same. There's always going to be comparisons. And the fact that we've got to play Rafa's team twice, and if Bruce is involved with the first of those games, at the very least, the comparisons will go through the roof, I guess, on the build-up. Alan Thompson, question, Holly and Steve, turning things on its head. If Bruce had £300 million to spend, would you seriously want him to spend it?
No way, not for me at all. There was that period where PIF we thought they were going to take over pretty quickly, and then people were saying, "Oh, well, give Bruce a chance," because he was on an all right run at that point. But for me, no way. I think you'd give him 300 million, he wouldn't know what to do because he's never had that type of money in his career. He'd probably go out, buy a few championship players that he had playing for him a few years ago, and you'd just be thinking, what on earth have we done here? It would be absolute madness. And I think it would be very damaging to whoever then inevitably replaced him when he wasn't doing good enough, and they'd have these players that were just useless and didn't fit into their team. Yeah,
I mean, it's it's just one of them things, isn't it? It's just going to go on and on and on. This season has just got it's a waste of a season, and everything that's going on around it is for me, £300 million. If it landed in Bruce's hands, I think he would. I just think he would. I just don't know. He just wouldn't know what he was doing. He would waste it. He would buy absolute garbage. It just doesn't bear thinking about. It really doesn't. Good question though, Colin Wilson. Can anybody explain to me why the club have given Gale a new contract and insist on not playing him? It beggars belief. It really does. I don't think it's true, but there was a rumor going around that he potentially had an accident at the weekend where he'd done something to his eye with a champagne bottle, like a champagne cork. Complete fabrication, I'm sure. But these are the kind of stories that circulate our club when there's lack of communication from the club. And for me, it's the way Newcastle United's always been. Somebody always knows a kit man, or knows the tea lady, or knows the guy who cleans the windows, or somebody at the ticket office, and the story gets passed on, and before you know it, everybody knows. And we've already seen it in the chat tonight. People saying, "I've heard two stories. Bruce is 3 games away from the sack," which is, to be fair, the story that we'd heard, and now we'll see Luke Edwards ploughing his narrative that Steve Bruce is here for the duration. So the fact that there's no communication with the club means that stories such as this always gain momentum because there's nobody there to stop them. If the club came out and said, Dwight Gale isn't in my plans, then at least we'd know. But I guess we can't answer the question, can we really, Holly? Why? Why is Dwight Gale being given a contract? Why is he being given a contract when Steve Bruce clearly doesn't want to play him or can't play him for whatever reason, despite him saying that's one of his favourite players and he wanted to play him, he wants to play him every week?
I don't think we can answer any questions about why the club does what it does because, quite frankly, I don't even think the club themselves know. But my opinion on that would be I don't think Steve Bruce makes those decisions. I think it's someone above him that kind of does that job for him. I genuinely think he has very little say as to what goes on in Newcastle United, and perhaps that's because the club don't have faith in him. But then you ask the question, why are you keeping him here? If you don't trust him that much that he's not allowed to make decisions about what he wants to do managing his team, then why on earth haven't you sacked him already? Again, more questions left unanswered that we won't find out. But also, I want your opinion. What did you think about the whole Steve Bruce going on holiday thing?
Well, I mean, look, it's international week. He's entitled to do what he wants during the break. There's players away on international duty. And from his perspective, I guess he thinks, well, if I can't do what I'm supposed to be doing, I might as well have a bit of time away. I guess, again, more rumours were flying around that it was a trip away which nobody really knew about. There was rumours flying around that he'd had a fallout with the top brass over the statement that was put out, and he felt as if he'd been thrown under a bus. This is where the rumour and the story came from, that he'd come back and he'd been given 3 games. So, nobody knows exactly what is going on. There's just rumour, counter rumour and everything. But Should Steve Bruce have gone away in that international break? Probably not. Certainly, if he'd gone away, maybe he should have gone away a bit more discreetly, not on a Jet 2 flight, where everybody can see him, where he knows there's going to be ordinary people on a plane who are going to get a selfie or get a phone out and say, oh, look, there's Steve Bruce, which is what happened. I mean, screw your loaf on, Steve. At least get a private jet. You've got a few quid. Get a private jet and jet off to Portugal or Spain. It's easy done. You've got the club. You could have borrowed one of Mike's helicopters, for God's sake. Don't just get on a Jet 2 flight and make it as obvious as that. Because nobody will believe you're on a scouting mission. I just think crazy. What about you?
Yeah, I think the same. I think, again, it's just a silly decision from Steve Bruce. Very poor timing. I think if you want to go on holiday in an international break, fair enough if we're doing okay in the league. But when we're in the position that we're in, you should be in training every day. You might have 6 players away on international duty, but focus on the ones that aren't on international duty. Focus on backups for the likes of Callum Wilson, who's got an injury. Focus on Coach and Woodman, who had an absolute howler in that game. And it looks like, Dubravka and Darlow could be out for a little bit longer. Nobody knows yet. Darlow's, of course, back in training, but it still might take him some time. He's been out for a while. Do your job, put in 100% effort, because if he wants to stay here, he's going to have to improve. It's as simple as that for me.
Yeah, definitely. Gallagher and Pigeon says, I honestly believe if we get beat Friday, he's gone. The whole stadium will be so toxic. It'll definitely open. So it's definitely toxic where you're lying in that net above the Gallaghers. Dear me, out. Gary, good evening. Stephen Ollie, what did you think about Steve Bruce's answer to leave for the Chronicle? We've covered that earlier on. Lots of praise coming in for Anthloma, and rightly so. Please make a donation if you can to the link at the top of the chat. Troll says Bruce has walked off the job before, so him saying he doesn't give up is not quite right. I know what you're saying there. And Alan Thompson just going on about Ant says, brilliant, Ant, well done. You've done 13 miles. Joe Linton has not done that in 2 years. Well done. Yeah, match of the day. Did you bother watching it, Holly? Because I did, and Alan Shearer highlighted exactly what we were saying on Saturday at Old Trafford, that Joe Linton was just going through the motions again. And I think the comparison between Manquillo running 90 yards to get his deserved goal, and what a finish it was, by the way, to Joe Linton ambling up, whilst we have people waiting across the ball into him, just sums up his day.
Yeah, it does. I didn't watch Match of the Day, to be honest. I was too busy coughing and sneezing, as you put it earlier.
God, I needed an umbrella in the front seat of that car.
I wasn't that bad. That's a bit dramatic. But I missed Match of the Day. Thankfully, it's not that I wanted to watch it anyway. To be quite honest, I didn't want a replay of that. I could quite happily rewatch the first half, but not so much the second. Joe Linton, I think he was... very, very poor. I think there's times where you think he's all right, maybe because he's better than Dwight Gale, and that's the only alternative currently when Callum Wilson's out. But that game, he was just awful. I mean, the headers were awful. He never goes for the ball when it's a header, and the size of him, the height of him, he should be doing that. Of course, he lacks confidence, a bit like Freddie Woodman, but still have a go. People's going to get off your back a lot more if you're actually attempting to do something, rather than if you just kind of trying to avoid these situations. Again, I don't even know what to say about him. He was playing in midfield some of the time. Maxi was the only one in the box multiple times, and you're thinking, where's Joe Linton at? And he just wasn't there.
Yeah, embarrassing really. Every game he plays, he's like that. Gary Milligan says to Gallagher Pigeon, you're only going to feather your own nest. See what you did there. Darren's asking if there's going to be any charity football matches with ex-players and celebrities lined up. Not this year, Darren, unfortunately. We're coming into the winter now. We may well do another Pavel Cup. It's obviously been affected by COVID, and we haven't been able to play the game for 2 years now, which is pretty sad. And none of the players are getting any younger. So let's see. It'd be nice to do the Pavel Cup again. Maybe it's a different venue. Maybe it's do it in Newcastle this time, but I haven't got my head round it yet. And I never like to preempt what's going to happen with COVID, etc. So the answer is possibly, but no confirmed plans as yet. Derek says, Steve, can you get Bruce on the show and do an IQ test on him? I think it would be interesting. Anybody do you know how to do an IQ test, Holly?
I think you can get them on Google, but I don't think he'd agree to come on. To be honest, he probably wouldn't even understand the concept of an IQ test or how to get onto the show, so he's already failed.
Life Goal says the irony is Rafa now has to deal in frees and cheap signings at Everton because of financial fair play. Rondon, Townsend are both good additions. Yeah, but even on frees and stuff, at least, these players come in, but he's got to pay them. And the players he's brought in are absolutely superb. God, what I would do for Rondon and Townsend at Newcastle at the minute. Colin Wilson says, the only money I would give Steve Bruce would be to buy a first-class ticket out of Newcastle. Yeah, a lot of people was hoping he was going to stay in Manchester. Yano says, can't fault Rafa other than the awful football that the team played. I know you're not a Rafa fan, Yano. I know you're not a Rafa fan. We know that. But listen, he's gone now, but there's always going to be comparisons. Geordie Sancaster says, Rafa's class. Bruce is lucky. Class will always last. Luck will run out eventually, which is, yeah, I agree. Bruce did have some great luck at the back end of last season. Plus, he had Graham Jones. I just really dread how it's all going to pan out. And of course, the two managers who were sitting in the stands at the weekend, Steve Cooper, who I've got to be unashamedly admit, I had to Google who the hell Steve Cooper was to find out that he was Swansea's manager. And the only reason I Googled him is because the Chronicle said, manager sitting in the stands who could pose an interesting question for Newcastle. Should Bruce go? He plays the Barca way. I was thinking, God, who is it? Who was there? And then Steve Cooper.
Yeah, but it's a bit of an overreaction. No,
Did you
not
know
at
who
all.
Steve Cooper was?
Not at all, no.
Dear God. And then, of course, Fat Sam, Big Sam Allardyce, of course, the man who took £6 million out of the club after, playing some of the worst football we've ever witnessed, who Mike Ashley apologised to in a newspaper article last year. So I'd say Sam Allardyce is a possible. People going, oh, he'd never come back anywhere near this club again. I'm telling you what, he got £6 million. He bought a lovely property in Spain, called it Casa Newcastle or whatever it was called. You could see him coming back, and I would cringe. I would cringe at having him as Newcastle manager again. But he's better than Bruce.
See, I don't know, you've seen him at West Brom and he didn't really do anything great. Of course, he ended up getting the sack again. I think it would be a nightmare to bring him back. I'd probably rather just stick with Steve Bruce or I don't even know. To be honest, you're stuck between a rock and a hard place there, I think. I really wouldn't want Sam Allardyce. Would it surprise us? No. In fact, I think it's something that would be most likely to happen in the current climate under Mike Ashley, because that's the type of thing that just sums Newcastle up, appointing ex-managers who've been absolutely horrendous for us, bringing them back and accepting a different result the second time. It's that definition of insanity, isn't it? Doing the same things, expecting different results, and that's what Newcastle always does. The other manager, I think, was a bit of an overreaction, saying he plays the Barca way and whatever else. He is at Swansea, so I don't know. I really don't. This is the problem that I said earlier, though. It's like we're going to sack Bruce and who we're going to bring in, because I don't think it's going to be anyone significantly better.
No, I see with Sam Allardyce at West Brom, I get where you're coming from. I just think he got taken in too late. It was too late to change it round. But he's got a history of going into clubs and turning them round. The problem with Allardyce, and the reason it costs you so much to get rid of him, is he always brings in about 20-odd backroom staff. Specialists, psychologists, sports therapists, you name it. He brings a lot of baggage with him, and I think that would probably put Mike Ashley off if he still intends to sell the club. Life Goal says, Bruce signed good players for Wigan, Valencia, Palacios, if that's the right pronunciation, Hull, Maguire, Robertson, Diarmé, Dugarry on a free to Hull, but anything over 10 million and he'd spunk. Lovely expression, Life Goals. On a night, £25 million on Shoudry. Yeah, I've got to be honest, Life Goals, it's one of those situations where, he'll never get 300 million, so we don't have to worry about this. Paul Gibson says, only thing that's 100%, if the Bruce stays, we will be playing the Mackhams in the Championship next season, probably. So, yeah, a lot of people saying that. Chris Heaton would be good to have back, says Tom Dixon. I think a lot of fans would like to see him again. I don't think it's something which would happen. Heaton was treated horrendously by Lambias, and, of course, Ashley is still at the club. Billy says Steve Cooper to replace his Uncle Tommy. Yeah, it is like a comedy. Colin says he didn't understand who Steve Cooper was either. More clicks for the Chronicle. Martin says Bruce is probably waiting for his £4 million to buy a villa in Portugal. And Life Goal says, Harry Redknapp might fancy one last go if he can manage remotely from the south coast. Yeah, Harry Redknapp, it's another name in the mix. There's that many who you could turn to. But again, Redknapp has gone on record as saying that, he had talks with Mike Ashley, I think, at one point, but nothing came of it. I couldn't see him coming either. Get Lampard, says Rowan Gulliver. None of these, any of these names, making you happy, Holly, or not?
I'd be happy with Frank Lampard, definitely. I think he'd be a great manager for Newcastle. I can't really see him coming here, to be honest, just because I think it's such an unappealing job. And if you come here, you're already kind of setting yourself up to fail, because you know you're not going to get backed by the hierarchy. You know you're not going to get the money to spend, and you'll have to take the blame for whatever ends up happening. So if you go on a lose and run, then that's kind of it. You're done. But Frank Lampard, I think, would be a great choice. I'd certainly be happy to bring him in. Harry Redknapp, I mean, he's went on record before saying that he's got quite a good relationship with Mike Ashley, I believe, which is already probably not the best thing for Newcastle fans, because we don't really want Ashley's pal, the whole Cockney Mafia situation again. It could help him out in terms of he could get more signings, more money to spend if they've got a good relationship. But I can't see him moving up to Newcastle. I don't think it's something that would suit him. But I do think he'd be better than Steve Bruce.
Yes, thanks to Harry on Twitter. He sent us the Wikipedia link to Steve Cooper's info. I mean, highlights, he's 41. He was born in Pontypridd, Wales. I used to know a printer down there called Paul, if that's any of the interest. Senior career, Wrexham, the New Saints, Rill, Bangor, Porthmadog, Wrexham Youth, Liverpool Youth, England. These are the teams he's managed, by the way: Wrexham Youth, Liverpool Youth, England under 16s, England under 17s, and Swansea City. Wow. Plays the Barca away, though, apparently. Could be good.
I don't want to find out if he plays the Barca away, because I don't want him here.
Could be good. And on Mackay says, I know Jones is only a coach, but I can only see Jones getting it temporarily to try and steady the ship. I don't see Ashley forking out much money when he doesn't want the club anymore. Yeah, I would agree. And I mean, Jones is there. He's in place. Of course, he is. He has worked with with some decent managers. But when he's tried to turn it, to his, when he's trying to try his hand at management, he fell a little bit flat in his face, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. Graham Jones, I wouldn't be happy to see him as manager temporarily, maybe just to kind of sort the issue while we'll look for someone that's appropriate to kind of fill the role, but not on a long-term sort of thing, and certainly not any more than like 4 games. I think it would be too much. I think Graham Jones is best suited to being a coach, and to be honest, if he is doing the tactics for this season, he's not really doing that well.
Yeah, I would agree. Thought Longstaff did well at the weekend, says Captain Keeford. Yeah, I would agree. I think the midfield in general did well. Almiron, St Maximin and Longstaff.
Yeah, I think Longstaff had a good game. Certainly was passing the ball a lot better, being more attacking minded, because that's what I've criticised him for, passing back too much, being too defensive. But he improved a lot that game, and hopefully now we see those players starting to gel together, because I think that's a big problem at Newcastle. Bruce can't decide which players are playing the best together, and he's constantly swapping it around.
Yeah, so I've lost who asked the question now, but somebody was talking about Lascelles. What do you make of Lascelles at the moment?
Not impressed. Still not impressed at all. Like last season, I gave him plenty of criticism. I don't think he stepped up to the mark. This season, I don't think he's really doing any better. Against Man United, not really the best. I think the defence as a whole has struggled this season, but Lascelles is the one you look to try and kind of steady the ship, to try and sort out the line, make it compact, use his voice. You don't see him doing that. He's quite a quiet captain and not the best defender, in my opinion.
No. Brian H says only place Bruce is back on holiday during the international break in a few weeks' time. Billy says, imagine our lot trying to play the Barca way. Recipe for disaster. This lot struggled to play the Accrington Stanley way. I wouldn't say it was harsh at all, that. Graham Jones is the favourite to replace Bruce if he does go. Yeah, because it's a cheaper option, isn't it, Holly?
Yeah, the least money that Mike Ashley has to spend, the better from his perspective.
Yeah, he's not going to want to spend a fortune, especially if he has to spend, a fortune on, getting rid of the current manager and his staff, which, we're led to believe is going to be in the region of about £9 million. Longstaff was scared to put the block in for Bruno's goal. Yeah, Ryan, I've got to be honest though, mate, that goal was quality, son. It was an absolute belter. There's nothing you could do. And I've seen so many of them against Newcastle down there. It reminded us actually of Wayne Rooney past Shea Given, but there's been so many. I've lost count of how many goals I've seen like that. But yeah, I get it. But he had a good game. Other than that, they all had made mistakes. Captain Keeford says Lascelles was more bothered about getting someone's shirt. Yes, we haven't spoke about that. Mick Lowes wasn't very happy yesterday, Holly, about it. He thought it was an absolute disgrace that at least two of our players went over and tried to get Ronaldo's shirt at the end of the game. He said it was an absolute embarrassment. He said it was an insult to the fans who'd made the journey, and he wasn't very happy about it. What did you think?
Of course, I wasn't happy about it, because I think after Ronaldo scored 2 goals against us, completely outshone our kind of defence and our goalkeeper. And we've went on to get beat 4-1, 19th in the league. It's not the best of times to do something like that, to be honest. If they did want to do something like that, they could have at least waited till they got off the pitch and it wasn't in front of the fans, because that's kind of just rubbing it in the fans' face almost, sort of thing. But I didn't find it surprising whatsoever, because I think there's so many players within that squad that really don't care about the club or the fan base. They're just here for a paycheck. I think our current players don't get enough criticism, because we're very quick to kind of put the blame on Ashley, Bruce, whatever, and ultimately it does fall at their door. But also a lot of the time, certain players could be doing a lot more, and they aren't doing that. They aren't stepping up, and they aren't doing what they're paid to be doing, and they're getting paid a significant amount of money to do something that they're just not doing well enough at. So it didn't really surprise us, to be honest, because like I said, I think a lot of them just have a lack of respect. But it's to be expected, I suppose. A lot of people, that's what the game was branded as. It's Ronaldo's debut. I got sent something earlier saying it was the most viewed game ever in the Premier League history. So he was the star of the show, but it was certainly bad timing, and they should have done it off the pitch if they were going to do that.
Yeah, first choice keeper, midfielder and striker out. What team could cope with that, says Yano. Yeah, you're right. Phil Davison says Lascelles is a waste of space. He's been out, has been for the last 4 or 5 seasons. Don't forget, guys, 5-minute run coming up after this, 7:30. Pete and Chris will be taking your calls tonight on what is happening at Newcastle United and talking about the weekend's game, no doubt. But it's your chance to come on air. Bump your gums, have a chat with the lads, and put in your views. Always a great show. One I always enjoy watching, it has to be said. So looking ahead to Leeds, Holly, on Friday night, you've already given us your prediction 3-2. Is there any, is there anybody you'd like to see in? Is there a formation you'd like to possibly see? I guess you'd like to see Darlow back in the sticks.
100%. I think if Darlow's even if he's not fully fit, but he's almost fit, I'd be willing to take that risk and put him in there, because Woodman, I've been criticised a lot for it, off certain people, because I've been on his back kind of from the offset. But I just don't think that he's good enough for Newcastle, and I think he proved that against Manchester United. And if anyone's still saying that Woodman's a better keeper than kind of Darlow, or that he's going to be the future number 1, I'm sorry, but I just really think that's deluded, because he was terrible. Okay, and fair enough to him for stepping up and saying, yeah, I take responsibility, but it still ultimately doesn't change the fact that he was, in my opinion, the main person responsible for us going to take that heavy defeat from Manchester United on Saturday. So yeah, Darlow coming in, certainly, if that's an option, I would be doing that. The defence, I'd probably keep the same, to be honest. Midfield, again, not much change. I'd probably put Dwight Gale in instead of Joe Linton, because I do think Joe Linton is probably better than Dwight Gale, but I think Dwight Gale's got more chance of scoring than Joe Linton, and that's what we need to do. We need to score. So I'll put him in there. Instead of the 5-4-1, I'd probably quite like to see a 4-4-2, but again, I'm not expecting that to happen. I think Bruce will stick with the 5-4-1.
Obviously, we didn't have a show last week, but you were quite the star of the show at the Newcastle United's Legends event, weren't you? I think you spent more time getting photographs than some of the players.
Well, I wouldn't go that far, but yeah, it was a really, really good event. I enjoyed it a lot. It was lovely to meet some people that watched the show, and there was a few people that had travelled all the way from down south. I was talking to someone that came down from Kent, which is like a long, long way, and just to hear people watching the shows and stuff, it's great, and because sometimes it feels like it's weird, because it's like it's not anyone watching, it's just me and you sitting talking here. But then when you meet people and they sit and talk about the show and say they enjoy it, it's great to hear. So yeah, it was a great show, and hopefully everyone had a good time that was there.
Yeah, it was fantastic. Good to meet so many nice people. Dan, yeah, Lascelles apparently asked, and so did Joe Linton. But Isaac Hayden obviously came out quite strongly on social media and denied it, and said that, He didn't, but it became a little bit of a tit for tat. That it all ended amicably, which is good. But at least Isaac Hayden reached out to one of the supporters and had a chat with him, which I thought was great. And apologies all round and move on, which is fine. But yeah, it's not good to see. It's a kind of thing, like Mick Lowe said yesterday. It's the kind of thing that should be done in the sanctum of the dressing room or in the tunnel. Don't do it on the pitch in front of your own fans who just watched the team get thumped 4-1. Please, just have a little bit of common sense. Billy Trey says, Leeds only have one centre-half available Friday. Well, there is some positives. And Derek says, well said, Holly. Woodman's terrible, flapping and can't hold the ball. No problem, Dan. Thanks very much. 1 hour. It passes very quickly on a Monday night. Don't forget, as I say, a 5-minute rant coming up in 30 minutes' time. I will be back tomorrow night with Liam Kennedy at 6. No, it might be slightly earlier, 5:45, because I've got a meeting tomorrow night which I've got to go to. But we'll definitely be on either way, either 5:45 or 6 o'clock. I'll have to make a quick call to Liam to sort that out. But definitely on in that same witching hour. Wednesday night, the Retro Show is on. As always, 6 till 7, and Supermac and Gibbo on Thursday, 6 till 7 as well. This week's Fab Four will be pre-recorded on Thursday night, and I'll stick it out slightly earlier on Friday for everybody. So I'll stick it out probably around about the 4 o'clock mark, so then you can just watch it at your own convenience. But I know a lot of you like to watch it together, so if I stick it out at 4, that gives you 4 to 6, and then obviously people will be heading off to the match and what have you. So if people get in, I know that the earlier start last week did seem to cheer a few people up there, and they were all in the house. So good stuff. Holly, as always, great to see you. I will see you on Friday night, and I'm glad it's not COVID, Holly. I'm glad it's not COVID.
Me too. Take care.
Take care. See you later. Bye. Bye.
Critics attack. It feels like I've been talking to myself again.